So everybody, our guest for today's Kids Comics Lunch is Mike Dawson, whose book, The Fifth Quarter, you see it on the screen right now, just came out from First Second. Was it like 5 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was end of May. So
end of May, yeah.
So coming up on 2 months.
Okay, coming up on 2 months. And as those of you who are here listening to me chit chat with Mike know that Mike and I actually met each other a long time ago at Scholastic. And so I'm just super, super excited that you're able to, we can reconnect here in a really awesome way. And so Mike went above and beyond and created a little presentation. So Mike, you can take it away. And then I think it's going to be about 20 or 25 minutes. And then we'll have lots of Q&A. So
I should go ahead? Okay.
Yep.
So yes, I've got this presentation and I think it's about 20 minutes. I'll try to time it just perfect. So it's not too long, but I don't speed through it. So my name is Mike Dawson, and thank you very much, Jana and Kids Comics Unite, for hosting me for this, because I'm really excited to the opportunity to talk about the new book, which is The Fifth Quarter, Book 1. This talk I've called it The Origins of the Fifth Quarter, and I thought that would be a good way to frame things. I'm going to talk about the origins of the book in a few different ways. A little bit about where the ideas came from, a lot about how I pitched it, and then some talk about how I approached writing of it, because the writing for me was different than how I've approached writing graphic novels in the past. So The Fifth Quarter was published this past May through First Second, and here's a nice pull quote from a great starred review it received from Booklist, and that made me feel very happy. It was originally supposed to come out on May 11th, but because of the Suez Canal blockage, there was a lot of delays on shipments around the globe, so it got pushed back to May 25th, which made me feel a little sad at first. But turned out to be a great thing that happened, because at the end of May, I don't know if everyone can relate to this, but to me, it felt like we were coming out of COVID, and I got to do some in-person events, which was like amazing. I signed books at my local bookstore as part of a benefit for the school PTA, and I got to go to a small classroom with actual fourth graders and show them a slideshow about the comic and talk to them about being a cartoonist. And they were both incredible experiences, and I feel really lucky that I got to do them in that short window when it felt like this was all wrapping up. I'm not sure how things are going to be for the next few months. So that was all great. And I've loved working with First Second. And as I said, I'm going to talk about how the book came about. But first, I'm going to give a brief overview of the story. So here we go. The main character is Lori Block, number 1, standing right there. She's ready to play. She's in 4th grade, and she loves being on her town's travel basketball team. Here she is jumping around. She's got a lot of enthusiasm. And here I'm going to introduce her parents, Jeremy and Rachel, and her younger twin siblings, Becky and Jason, who are less enthusiastic about watching Lori play. Here, somebody has passed Lori the ball. Her coach yells at her to go do something with it. And the reason he has to yell at her to do that is because Lori really only plays during what's called the 5th quarter, which is an extra period at the beginning of the game where the not so good kids go in. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with basketball. Maybe you can see what she's doing wrong here and why the whistle is blowing. And that is because she's double dribbling. The ball gets sent to the other team. Lori has a lot of things to learn, and the 5th quarter is a place to learn them. The points don't count if she scores. Here we see again later on, back in the 5th quarter, getting the ball. Again, she's not sure what to do with it, but everyone's encouraging her to shoot. So she shoots, and we see that despite having not yet developed her skills, she has actually got a lot of promise. She's actually got a lot of natural talent shooting. Here, after the 5th quarter ends, you see she's getting encouragement from the assistant coach, and we see she really feels great. Like, really great. Like, she didn't have a lot to do with the outcome of the game, but she feels good about how she did, and this leads her on a journey towards getting better. Here she is later in the book, arriving at a facility called Game Speed, which is a training facility where she could play an after-school league, get coaching. And I'm going to talk more later how she came to start taking classes there a little bit later on. Off the court, Lori isn't hugely popular at school, but she has a nice tight circle of friends. Here they are. She thinks her friends are pretty great. The only thing she wishes is that they also love to play basketball. So here from left to right is Maddie, Suzanne, Sophia, Elise, and there's Lori. Sophia is on the team with Lori in the fifth quarter as well, but is not crazy about it the same way Lori is. Lori tries to get them into basketball, and here she's managed to convince them to play foursquare, which is not the same game, but it does use the same ball. To her frustration, they barely even want to do that, and Lori has trouble not pushing what she wants on other people. And inevitably, she pushes too hard and ends up alienating herself from her own friend group. She's all alone at school. At the same time, at home, there's big changes happening. Her mother, Rachel, who works full-time, decides to run for local office, which is complicated because the person Rachel's going to run against is the father of one of Lori's good friends, Maddie. There's the realization that her mother's going to be making life difficult for her socially, and it all becomes a bit much. She's not doing well as she liked in her game, she's outcast from her friends, and her mom's ambitions are only going to make things worse. So Lori Block loves to play basketball and wants to get better. She wants to find her place at home and within her family. At school as well, and among her friends. And the fifth quarter is about whether or not she can. So that's a brief overview of the plot. Lots of other things happen, but that's the basic premise. But because this is a group of kidlit authors and cartoonists, I thought it would be interesting to talk about how the idea for the book came about, and then also about how I put together the pitch. Because I have to be honest, the initial idea was not mine. It wasn't something I came up with on my own, and involved a lot of luck and serendipity. So on May 20th, 2018, I tweeted something like this. Something about growing up as a nerd who hated jocks and sports. Now, as the father of a fourth grader who was really into basketball, I was seeing for the first time how sports can build confidence and not just knock it down. The reason I don't have the actual tweet is because I have my tweet set to automatically delete. And I wasn't thinking about how one day I might want to, save a specific tweet to put in a slideshow so I could talk about how it literally changed my creative life. Because after I tweeted whatever I tweeted, I got a direct message from an editor at Slate asking if I would be interested in turning that idea into a short comic essay. So see that right there, May 21st. So the editor, I knew him a little bit. I'd drawn 2 comic essays for Slate before. So comic essays do a lot of these short cartoon, like I do a lot of work for the Nib. And I did a few things for Slate, and I did one thing for New Yorker so I could put it on my little resume. Claim to be a New Yorker cartoonist. So one of the cartoon comics I did for Slate was about Disney's Sophia the First. The other one was about some drawings my daughter had done in school. And I also knew Dan Coyce a little bit because I had written a comic essay about animal rights, which had been published on the Nib. It was called Long Street Farm, and it was shortlisted for that Slate Cartoonist Studio Prize. So Dan knew my work a little bit from there. But either way, you can imagine that getting asked to make a comic for Slate would be something I would be eager to do, and I did say yes. And so here is what I made. It's called My Daughter the Jock. I'm going to read just a few parts of it, not the whole thing. So I don't often take video of my daughter's basketball games. So I was lucky to catch that moment, her first and only basket scored that season. She was playing on a fourth grade Terrell team. They took it seriously. They were coached to win. For a kid who's a little bit shy, it was amazing to see how sports could build confidence. That was not the experience I had when I was growing up. So that's my gym teacher making fun of me. Sports did not empower all kids, just the kids who were any good. I hated those jocks, those dumb meatheads, tormenting us poor, misunderstood, sensitive outsiders. There I am with my Rocket Raccoon comic, thinking about how they're going to be sorry. So back in the present, I felt tense anytime my daughter went in. I didn't want her to be the one who let the team down, imagining her getting yelled at. But I never saw the girls tear each other down when things went bad. When her season ended, my daughter joined a weekly youth league. And she plays bigger kids, girls and boys, and they're rough. They knock each other around, but they're all there for the same reason, just to get better. She is getting better, much better. And I wish I could help her improve, but she's better than me now. And I still suck, but now I don't mind at all. And now I'm going to show I can get it to play this little video. And number one. You hear my dumb voice again. So that's the video I mentioned at the beginning of that strip. And I did actually essentially take that moment, put that straight into the fifth quarter. There she is in the fifth quarter, taking a shot and getting a swish. Although I think my daughter's one was a little bit sweeter. If it's a donk flute, not as good. But anyway, so that was My Daughter the Jock. The version that I published with Slate looked a little different. I did redraw it for to put on my Instagram because I post diary comics and like cartoon essays frequently there, and I'm doing that to try to build up an audience. Just own a whole separate thing, but I wanted to put this one up because it looks nicer. So that was how I came to do that comic, but I still hadn't got the idea for the fifth quarter. What happened was later on, I was emailing with an editor at a publisher called Learner, but about a separate topic because he was a podcaster at the time when we were talking about me coming on as a guest. But he read My Daughter the Jock, and he suggested that I think about adapting it into a middle grade book. I blacked out. I don't know why. Those are the other books they're people they're working with, but I don't know if some stuff has been announced yet. And I thought it was a great suggestion. I was interested in basketball, seeing what it was doing for my child in terms of building confidence. And as somebody who'd not grown up with many positive experiences of sports, I had a lot of thoughts and emotions and ideas about the game and what a young person might be able to get out of working hard at it. So it was not difficult to start thinking about this topic in terms of a book. So basically just poured right out. And so I occasionally get heart palpitations thinking about how different my life would be if I had never tweeted whatever it was I tweeted that day. But thankfully that is something for an alternative universe, because here in this universe, I did tweet that, and through all those lucky things, it became time for me to start thinking about creating a pitch for a book. So prior to the fifth quarter, I have written a couple other books, other graphic novels. All of them, though, pretty much I've approached by first writing and drawing all the comics, and then taking that work to a publisher to see if they were interested in publishing it. Basically all of those. The fifth quarter was going to be the first time I made a real pitch. And I was very fortunate, again, and the editor who had suggested it to me helped me out. He helped give me some pointers on what to get put in, like what I should be doing to put together a solid proposal. So here's a little bit of the summary. Estimated the page count, brief overview, a list of the main characters. A lot of those things did change. And in addition to this, I wrote a long summary, which was about 3 pages, I think, 3 to 4 pages, describing the entirety of the plot. I made some character designs. And if anyone's familiar with the book, you'll see that some things look slightly different here than they do in the actual book. Laurie's hair had it doing some different things, and that's a very different design for Laurie's mom and her little brother, whose name was Maxwell. I split him into 2, turned him into some twins, Becky and Jason. This one's interesting. This is probably the most helpful early drawing I've ever made, because I printed it out and hung it next to my drawing tablet while I worked, because pretty much all of these girls are not main characters, but I do need to keep the team consistent. I need to know what people look like, what their numbers were. So fantastically useful drawing. Because a lot of these people, actually in book 2, some of these girls become main characters, but at this point, I essentially just think about Laurie and some of her friends around the fifth quarter. There just has to be a lot of other people on the team. In addition to the character designs, the editor recommended drawing 2 sample scenes, putting together sample scenes. He suggested one should show basketball action, show how I could do that. So here is the page from the sample scene that I put together. Laurie shoots and misses at a critical moment in a game. And kind of interestingly, this is how that page appeared in the book. So I actually didn't change a lot to that part in terms of layout, but you can see just some changes in terms of character design, and just sort of, I determined a palette, later on, I had a palette for the book and so on. But essentially the page flow is the same. And the second scene that I put together, again, you can see that this is a different palette, a much brighter green than I used in the actual book. This was to show something about Lori as a character, who she was, and something about the relationship she has with someone else. So this is her and her dad, the car. They see a lawn sign for somebody else's political campaign. You remember the part of the book is that Lori's mom is running for office. They talk a bit more about what they've seen, and Lori's asking questions, and her father introduces the idea of charisma to her because he's trying to explain it. And the scene then becomes about Lori and her feelings of insecurity, and that she can't get people to do what she wants and to like what she has to say. And this also made it into the book pretty close to what I put into the pitch. So here again is the dad trying to explain it. And again, it's provoking the introspection from Lori. And of course, dad is doing his best to reassure her, but she knows what she's been going through. And while this scene here is very similar from the pitch to the final, what feels to me very different in the eventual finished version is I understood better where it was taking place in the context of the whole book. Lori and her dad weren't just out for a drive. I knew now they were going somewhere specific. I know what they were, and I knew the reasons why they were going there. They're going back to this place, Game Speed, where Lori eventually meets coaches and other players who share her passion and enable her to focus and get better without pushing away her friends. And I knew the reasons her parents had agreed to put her there into this program, which was related to what was going on with her mom's campaign for town council, what was happening with her at school. So I knew why they had basically taken these steps. So that is basically what went into the pitch. And again, it was incredibly helpful to have someone help walk me through it. And, so I hope that's helpful to see. In here is a screenshot I took from the Publishers Weekly announcement for the books. Because after the pitch went to auction, it landed at first second, 2 books, 2-book deal. And you can see I look very happy. And the other 2 authors look happy as well, because they must have also been pleased with their deals. So the next thing I had to do was write the book. And so I mentioned earlier that I'd written other graphic novels. And one of the reasons I think I felt that I was comfortable approaching coming at these in the way I did, which was to write the comics and then find publishers, had a lot to do with, I knew what my audience was generally an alternative comics adult audience. I knew that was who I was writing for. So while some of these books, Rules for Dating My Daughter and Freddie and Me, and A Space, are I'd call all ages books, like they're not inappropriate, they aren't written for a middle grade audience, whereas the 5th Quarter is. So those are something that I had a new thing that I had to think about. So Freddie and Me and Rules for Dating My Daughter, they both, I'm getting a little bit mixed up, sorry. Okay, so back to this. What I needed to do with the 5th Quarter is make a comic that was deliberately written for middle grade readers. And before I get too far into how I thought about this and how I approached it, I feel like I want to say that I loved writing for this audience because I just consider that a constraint. And I like constraints. I think constraints are good creatively. And that's all I think it was. It was a constraint that the story had to be appealing to readers who are basically between the ages of 8 and 12, as I understand it. And I didn't approach this thinking that, I have to dumb the story down or not use big words, because I don't really think I did. Sort of worry that maybe I shouldn't have done this, but the subplot of the book is all about like someone running for town council. It's not like, that's not exactly something that little kids are interested in. So it's maybe not an exciting topic for a kid, but I wanted to let the story be about what I thought it should be about. And the way I approached the constraint was by doing my best to write the story always from the perspective of the character that I want the readers to relate to. Because Lori's the main character, and so my attempt in terms of that constraint was to always have everything seen or reacted to from her point of view. So it means all the stuff that I have written plenty of, stuff from my perspective, a middle-aged man, I'm not going to put this into this book. It's, that aspect of My Daughter the Jock was just not in, I didn't really include it in the story at all. And there's some panels from Longstreet Farm, which again is a comic about children and it's about parenting, but it's written from my point of view as a grown person. Lori's parents are major characters in the book. Lori's a 4th grader, so her parents are a big part of her life. But the story needed to be about what Lori wanted, her struggles and her emotions and goals. While she wasn't always great, like she doesn't act right the whole book. Like she's not always right. She makes mistakes, and she struggles with saying and doing the wrong things. She's not always the good guy, but the fifth quarter need to be a story told the way that she sees it. I mean, this is what we tried to do, and who knows if I succeeded. So back to the subplot. This is Rachel, her mom, and here she is in this scene. She's sitting with some friends. They're helping her with their political campaign. And they're trying to hash out why is Rachel doing this, and what they mean is what's the message that they're taking to potential voters to convince them to cast a vote for Rachel. And one of the people she's working with suggests that she cares about the community. And here comes Lori with her dad and the twins, and they're just back from Lori's first session at Game Speed. And Lori's glowing. She's really excited about how everything went. And she starts to tell Rachel all about it. But unfortunately, one of the people working on the campaign interrupts. She has to run. Can they just stay focused on the messaging right now? Okay, so sorry, Lori, hold that thought. And the moment has passed. Go on, Lori, go upstairs, have a shower, gonna have dinner soon. And as she walks upstairs, she's hearing the conference continue. They're asking, why is Rachel doing this? And the last thing she hears is her mom explain, I'm doing it for my children. From Lori's point of view, it doesn't feel like her mom is doing any of this for her. And so there's more. So this is a hot fall day, and maybe Lori would like to be out somewhere shooting hoops. But that's not what her mom has roped her into. They're out walking the streets of town, holding leaflets. And she's asking, why do I have to do this? And the answer is, Rachel wants to spend some time with her. Rachel has desires as a character. She wants to run for office, and she wants to have a good relationship with her daughter. And it definitely doesn't feel like on this hot fall day, Rachel's going to get what she wants. And so she lets Lori off the hook. She lets her, dad can come get her. And later on, Lori's with her friend Maddie, whose dad is the one who's running against Rachel. And Lori's processing some of the way she feels about this annoying thing her mom is doing. And she convinces herself that she doesn't want her mom to win. And it turns out that her friend Maddie shares a lot of similar feelings about what her dad does. And ultimately, it seems like the two friends find this whole thing gives them something to have in common rather than to pull them apart. And so in the story, finally, it's election day, and her mom is all over the place with things to do, volunteers to coordinate, and votes to get out. But from Lori's point of view, there's nothing about the day that's exciting at all. To her, the election night returns party is just the reason she has to put on a nice dress and be polite to strangers, and strange grown-ups, but at least some of her friends are there with her. And she's still talking her big talk about how she doesn't care if her mom wins, but then her mom comes home with the results, and it seems like maybe Lori does care a bit more than she thought. I don't want to go too much further. It's kind of spoilery here. I didn't know how to end this. But I just want to underline this idea that I have that I'm trying to approach this middle grade book, looking at it from the way that, so the reader is learning things as Lori learns things, and the reader maybe can infer what's happening, but doesn't really get the answer until Lori gets the answer. We infer what other characters want and what they're feeling from what Lori sees and experiences. What Lori learns in the scene that comes after this, I'm not going to go into, but what her mother really meant when she said she was doing it for her children. And hopefully it makes sense to Lori at the same time as making sense to the reader. And so I hope that wasn't too short or too long. That brings me to the end of what I put together. So I hope it was useful in terms of showing how I had approached putting together the proposal and writing a book for this specific audience, which again, this is the first time I've tried doing that. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Yes. I'm guessing that there's people here who have questions. I see there's people who have questions about the plot, but I'm guessing the reason we're here mostly is to talk about
Should I?
creative process. Yeah, why don't maybe you could stop sharing your screen.
There we go.
And then,
Okay,
yeah,
I feel
can...
Okay.
All right, so I have some of my own questions, but I'd love it if any. Oh, Courtney has a question. Go ahead.
Hi, am I on?
Yep.
Hi, I'm in a very similar boat. I just got a deal actually from Macmillan as well, doing a basketball book. So I was wondering, I'm not that big of a sports person and never was in middle or high school. What did you do to prepare to draw these game scenes? How did you keep everything flowing and looking right? Sorry, I'm not
Well,
sure
I know
if I'm
you're.
making sense, but yeah, like how did you prepare to keep it exciting and easy to follow and all that kind of stuff?
So I thought about it a little bit because I have been told that the game action sequences are quite clear in the book, and I think that actually it was a bit of an advantage that I also didn't know that much about basketball.
Yeah.
Well, two things. Because I didn't take for granted that any of my readers would know all the ins and outs of basketball as well. So I'm making it clear, I'm somewhat making it clear for myself, that I'm understanding that, I don't know everything about basketball. However, I will sort of caveat on that. Part of the reason I was able to write the book and I felt very comfortable writing it is because I had, at this point in my life, having a daughter who was playing,
Right.
I happened to go to a lot of basketball games, and a lot of practices, and so I actually did watch a lot of basketball
Right.
at that point, because my daughter went to a similar facility to the Game Speed one, and I was down there, a couple nights a week watching. My daughter actually doesn't really play basketball anymore. COVID kind of like killed a lot of that. There's going to be there's an attempt to get back to it this fall. It's gonna happen, but I worry if a third book ever happens, but I don't have that resource there that I was really using. I'm gonna have to just go down and watch Strange Kids play, because I felt like somebody who did just wasn't an expert. That was very helpful to basically just watch practices and games and just become well versed in it. So I hope that helps.
Unfortunately, I don't have children or anyone. I don't think any of my cousins are in that space quite yet. But
are you writing about kids? Is it about kids?
It's a middle grade book, yeah.
I have discovered there's these facilities all over the country. So I don't.
Right. We have a field house here I could probably go and sit in on, but lucky for you, your character is not great at basketball. Mine's supposed to be really good. Okay. So I'm like, oh snap. Okay. I better look like I know what I'm doing. But thank you. Thank you for sharing.
All right. Who else has a question? Michaela, how do you say your name? Can you say it for me?
It's Mikkel.
Mikkel. Okay, Mikkel.
Yeah, perfect. So what programs did you use to, do your graphic novel and your spreads?
So I work on a Cintiq, which is the large tablet you can draw directly on. And I drew the book directly into Photoshop. It's the first time I'd written a graphic novel this way, so I don't know. I felt actually Photoshop was a very useful program to be using specifically for writing, because of just being able to work in layers just helps sort of build up the story. Because I would create roughs and thumbnails directly into the Photoshop, and then just sort of build on top of that in terms of finals. So that's how I did all the creating of the artwork assets, and then I was using InDesign to lay it out. For second likes the cartoonist to put the text directly into InDesign.
Oh, nice.
For easy editing. So it took a little bit of learning how to do that. But I think it's great, actually. Now I'm super into it, as a way to work, because it does make editing easy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
It's a beautiful book.
Oh, thank you.
Steve?
Okay, yes, I thought it was a great book. I bought it yesterday and read it, and I was really excited to read it. And as a sports fan, as a long-suffering Knicks fan, I appreciated all the basketball stuff. So I thought you really were a fan from reading this book. You had all the terms and all the, all the phrases and the Steph Curry and the references and all that stuff. But I guess my question is, when I read it, I especially liked that fight drill when she's doing that with her buddy.
Okay.
And the intensity that you captured. So how did you feel I felt like that really was, so powerful. How did you feel like you came to that?
So again, it was honestly like, this was the thing I saw happening, like from going basically and watching kids train, watching like, a little bit like, I'm trying not to talk like as if I like just basically wrote a book about my daughter, because it's not really true. Like Lori is her own character, and and really very unrelated to my daughter. I say that because my daughter's in middle school and doesn't really want like a book that's like about her. But it was again very useful to have, like to see a kid who maybe perhaps isn't always like so assertive, sort of like find that through sport, and like to sort of like see other kids as well, like discover that, like, because again, like I really hated jocks like when I was a kid, but I never realized that like like learning to like play sports can make you feel good about yourself, and you can feel yourself get better at something. And it's just an experience I just didn't have anything I'd never seen it happen. So not even just talking about with my own child, just like children in general, seeing that. And it's not to like say that kids sports is like a utopia, because it is not. Because I'm learning with my son who's a little younger, like boys sports is maybe like unpleasantly like competitive in a very early age. But like, so it's not like all like wonderful. But I guess this is like a book where like I did benefit a lot from observing and just trying to draw from life, which is something I try to practice in general all the time. Like I do a lot of diary strips and a lot of diary comics frequently. So I'm glad you liked it. Thank you for buying it.
Yes, you're very welcome. I right. But I had one other thing that I wanted to ask you about. I noticed in the book there's no talk about any, crushes, any of that girl boy stuff that happens sometimes in fourth grade, which I found refreshing. It was really a sports book, and it was about her journey and her arc. So was there a conscious decision not to put stuff about boys?
I think it just felt natural to me from my observations of what like kids that age sort of seem to be. And I do actually have spent, I was a leader of a Girl Scout troop for many years. Like, so I spent a lot of time around like kids that age, like, I did not see that much in terms of like crushes at that age. Now I'm seeing it a lot more, now I'm starting to see a lot more kids who are like 7th, 8th graders. But I also it was nice that it was like practically, aside from her family members, there's like no boys in this book. Like there's like one scene where she asks some boys in the playground, like for, a question. They're all like, oh. It was fun to do that. Just because I've actually written some of my other books are very boy centric. The Boy Scout one is incredibly, I don't think there's any girls in that book. So it was a nice sort of change of pace to flip it.
Glenn?
Hi. My experience with sports is pretty similar to yours, except I had a Ghostbusters shirt instead of a Batman one.
Oh yeah.
So I'm putting together a book now, and just shaping the story, really trying to like block it out. And I was wondering, in your process and working with your editor and everything, was there anything that really changed drastically as you were just putting it all together and shaping, her worldview along with her mother's story? And like, so I wonder if like their stories kind of dovetail together, and like what really big changed and how did you learn from it, I guess?
So the way that I write graphic novels, and I know that cartoonists are all a little bit different, so I'm very much of the kind of draw it, which is again why I liked working in Photoshop, because up till now I've never done this before, but like to draw it in a very loose form, like to basically write the whole thing. So like thumbnails, but large page size ones, and then going back and rewriting it, and then going back and rewriting it again, and like because it did change. Like characters changed, relationships changed, like sort of some things about like the idea that maybe that her friend's father was going to be her mom's opponent, that came to me later on, like sort of after an initial draft or a rough draft. I heard a funny thing once said about graphic novels, and it wasn't a very complimentary thing, but it was sort of like referring to the maybe the literary comics boom of like the mid-aughts, that a lot of graphic novels are like good first drafts. And this was because a lot of cartoonists are putting a lot of work into like the drawing aspect of creating their graphic novels. And sometimes, I don't know, I've had this experience myself years and years ago, like, you know, if you spend a lot of time cross-hatching a page, you may be reluctant to like change it around all that much. So this, for me, as someone like, you know, like on this book that was like my 5th or 6th book, you know, this was the first time where I like was very, very open to like rethinking it. And like, I think this story benefited from that. So there was a lot of changes. I think it became stronger from actually doing that. Like, I was glad to sort of allow myself to have that kind of flexibility. So I don't know, does that answer the question? Or
In a way, because it sounds like previously you'd worked like sort of like not like page to page, panel to panel, and like built it as you went.
yeah,
And maybe this was more of like a shuffling and like working on it in one whole.
working as a whole, still
Yeah.
building it as I go, but but allowing myself through the tools that I happen to be using to just be much more open to like rethinking and changing, and like just, you know, than I had been. And not just in my own personal process. Like when I wrote, one of the books is about like my memoir about like really liking Queen. Like I wrote like hundreds of pages of that, like with, you know, with brush and ink, and like I just did the whole thing. So like when it went to an editor, I was like, no, I'm not changing any of that. Like, and I think that it was like a good first draft, like when it was ultimately published. But writing the sequel, which I finished to the 5th quarter, I'm just about wrapping it up now, like just getting like final like typo type notes and stuff like that. That was an interesting one because that was like a story I didn't really know what it was going to be, and I really did have to find it through the writing it once, writing it twice, like doing it multiple times, because I never had this experience before. It's like I had to write a second book, you know, and I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen in it. So that was like I'm a big fan of like this approach.
All right, thanks.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Oops, yeah, Jonathan, I saw you raise your hand.
Thank you. So following up on the question of rewriting it, are you scripting your entire stories and then submitting it to editors, or is the process more like you have a synopsis, a general story idea, and then you're submitting, you know, thumbnails? How does that work when you're going back and forth?
So the way it worked with the 2 5th quarter books was that I was creating a thumbnail version of the whole story, or at least like the gist, like a fairly close to readable version of it, like, you know, and then I would send it out to my agent and my editor at that point to get sort of like general feedback, and then I do a rewrite. I personally am not very good at like working at like writing a script. It's because I don't know if it's the same for all cartoonists. It's definitely this way for me, that I just actually feel the way that my brain writes is different when I'm using like a pen and like drawing out word balloons and filling them in by hand. Like I feel like I'm actually sort of understanding how a page is going to flow better than when I personally try to write a script. I know a lot of cartoonists, if I do write scripts, it's just sort of my own personal thing. I can't really do it. When I've tried it, it really is like a rough draft, because once I take it to to the actual page, it changes a lot. So that was the process. It was writing something close to readable, getting some feedback, and then rewriting. And I have to say that the editorial process that I had was not very. It wasn't that hands-on. It was very sort of, you know. We had like just a couple phone meetings, like at certain points along the process, like a Zoom like this, to sort of like kind of talk about big issues maybe, or like just general thoughts. And so I like that in the writing process. In terms of like once the book is published, you worry like, maybe someone should have held my hand more, but I don't know. But I enjoyed that process. And I hope that I get to do it again. So,
thank you.
Okay.
Mike, could you say something about how the book ended up at First Second? Because you showed us that it was actually an editor from Learner who reached out to you initially and asked you about the middle grade, and he gave you a lot of help with the proposal. So
Yep.
how did it end up at First Second?
So he gets a big thank you in the back, in the back of the book, because and he was extremely understanding and very, very cool about it and supportive. But when I was initially doing it, he helped me with this pitch, and it went to Learner. And they looked it over. And again, Twitter comes into it, and I'm not really I don't really love being on Twitter, but it comes into it in that I had just been drawing some pages for the sample, and I tweeted some drawings. And another editor saw them and contacted me like, "Oh, this is great, and maybe I would be interested in sort of knowing more about the project." And I actually deleted that tweet very quickly because I'm like, "Oh, maybe this was not a good thing to have done, maybe not an appropriate thing to have done." But I had an agent who was helping me just, with the basic, it was going to go to Learner. Nothing wrong with Learner at all. I'm so grateful to this editor and Learner, but he was like, "If you want, I can try to share it around." And I'm like, I do kind of want that because I kind of want this to be my career. And I want the best opportunity that I can get. And I don't know if that's basically and I spoke to my wife, and that was, I guess I should try to do that. I should try to give the book the best opportunity I can give it. So that's essentially what happened. It went into an auction, and then it ended up with First Second.
Awesome.
I'm a bad person.
No, it's tricky. Yeah, I can imagine that it's hard to make that decision, but it's the right decision. Yeah. Oh, okay. Bonnie, you're raising your hand.
So the agent that you had, was that the agent you've used all along, or did you get a new agent for this middle grade?
So no, the agent that I worked with on the fifth quarter, another cartoonist who was working with Learner put me in contact with him. Another cartoonist with the middle grade book coming out through Learner. I had worked with an agent years and years ago on Freddie and Me, and then I went for a period of time in which I was unagented, and then now I'm working with this one agent that I really like. So it's going good so far.
Can you say something about how you have supported yourself all this time as a cartoonist?
Well, so up until the fifth quarter, I was not supporting myself as a cartoonist entirely. I mean, I was making some money through comics, and there was a period in which I was making a reasonable amount of income. Not reasonable, but I was making some income through getting work published, online. So to back up, we met when I was working at Scholastic. So I had a career going in well, that was at Scholastic, but somewhat related to kids content. But once I left Scholastic, I went to a company called Brain Pop, and I actually sort of developed a whole secondary career developing materials for children online, kids content. And I was very, very fortunate at Brain Pop, and then I was actually making comics for this website. I was hired, it was my job to make short comics, explainer comics. And I worked there for about 10 years. And then I was working for a while making comics freelance and also doing freelance online education material. Then once I got this fifth quarter deal, it was the first time that it seemed legitimate, not legitimate, but I could take the risk that this could be the thing I do. But to basically be honest, I have a spouse who has a job that earns a reasonable income that we can live off of and raise our kids. So I kind of think about it a little bit as a donut hole, because if I was making a smaller amount of money, which I've done a lot of times, and I would have to have supplementary income. I'm not making enough money that I could live off what I do, but I am making enough money that I can't not do this book. that it's like an offer that like I couldn't turn down, and I couldn't to actually get the book done on like an aggressive schedule. I wanted it to be done quickly, and I wanted especially the sequel to come out quickly. I sort of feel like I'm in that donut hole where like it was a good deal. But as that spreads out over 3 years, 3 to 4 years in installments, you know, it's not like it's, you know, it's less as it spreads out. And I don't really know what to do about that donut hole. I mean, I feel like cartoonists talk about and authors talk about this a lot. And I feel like it's a positive thing that they talk more honestly about it now than I think they did years in the past. Like I see authors talking frequently on social media about how it's not possible for them. It would not be possible for me without I have a spouse that has another income. And so I think that's sort of like, that's what's scary to me about being an author. Like it does seem like very, very challenging for the vast majority of us. You know, like I see these articles all the time talk about how like comics are like bigger than ever. And like, you know, more people than ever are like, you know, buying comics, but and you read them and you're like, okay, well, there's actually like 5 cartoonists who are selling all the books. so you know, Dave Pilkey's doing, you know, extremely well. And I mean, that's just, I think those articles are funny because they just, you know, it's great that the industry is doing well. It honestly is great that the industry is doing better than it's ever been since I've been involved in it. But, you know, it's not like you know, it is still just a couple cartoonists exactly who are like driving kind of those millions of sales and stuff. But I assume that everyone here can relate to a lot of what I'm saying. So I see some nods. Good, thank you.
Oh, Josh, you have a question?
Yeah, not to derail this completely from the 5th quarter, which was amazing, but I'm curious if you have thought about revisiting the 2 brothers from A Space and pitching that as a middle grade book, because that's one of my favorite things that you've done.
Oh, thank you. And hello, Josh, how are you?
Good.
So we talked what the question is about a book that had these little characters that I created called Jack and Max, and they were superpowered brothers, and it was really a comic about siblings like fighting and squabbling and like, beating each other up. It's just they had powers. I did actually think at one point about like attempting to like maybe I could turn this into what I think. I'm not like super great on like all the classifications of like what's different from middle grade to I think young reader. I think it would be more of a young reader Dogman type book if it was ever to happen. But I just to sort of make this more general, I'm hoping to try to continue in middle grade because of the things I was talking about. Like I actually like really enjoyed like writing fiction just with those constraints. And I don't know, maybe I was right or wrong in terms of like what the constraints are, but like it was like really pleasurable to me as a writer just to think about it in those terms, just to sort of like make this relatable to these readers and to think about readers basically the first time, you know, ever. Because it's sort of like an alternative comics, like the culture of alternative comics, which I was very sort of like, you know, wrapped up in for many years. Like it's just sort of like write what you write and like readers will come. And that absolutely can happen, but it was also nice to think, you know, to think about an audience. And like it was, I liked it, and I hope to do it again.
Anybody, any other questions? Mike, could you talk a little bit about your podcasts, your plans? We spoke briefly about plans for the Process Party podcast and other things that you're thinking about doing in the next year or so?
Yeah, so I'm thinking about relaunching the Process Party podcast, which was a podcast that I had done for a number of years with another cartoonist called Zach Soto. And it was a podcast in which we interviewed cartoonists. And I really like doing that sort of thing and actually find it very inspiring to talk to other cartoonists. And like, I enjoy like hearing about other people's process. That's why we call it Process Party. But it's like, it's kind of a funny thing because like sometimes before we do an episode, I feel a little bit like, oh, I gotta do my homework and read the book and like come up with some questions, but then at the end of every one, I would always be like amped up and like ready to like go make some comics, because it was like just fun to talk to other cartoonists. I had it at different points in my life where like I was like physically like in the proximity to other cartoonists. I'm not really living like that anymore. You know, and the internet is like a different, you know, it's not quite, you know, Twitter is not exactly the same as hanging out with other cartoonists. So like, it was nice to have this opportunity to chat with other people making work. So there's that. And the other thing I do is I'm very, I've only become in the last year and a half, like very active on Instagram, posting diary comics, like a couple a week. And like actually building up for the sort of like, for the first time for me, it's like a sort of like a larger readership. You know, people who are like actually following my work. Like I'm trying to make like small comics there. Like some of them I actually spend quite a bit of time on. But it's tricky because it's being published by like this social media company that I may not really like, that I might have a lot of problems with. And, you know, there's also these questions of like, what happens when these social media platforms dry up? Because that happened to me with Tumblr. I started to get a little bit of traction there at one point, and then Tumblr just completely dried up one day and became like useless. Instagram at the moment seems to still be like a place where people are active. And that's something I actually like. I found that it was a good practice to do for the like mercenary reason of just like attracting a readership, but also from the creative reason of writing more and just putting more work out there, but making the effort myself to like maintain a sketchbook and sort of like a looser cartooning like practice like that. So I'm doing those things.
All right, I think we're nearing the, let's see, the top of the hour. So going once, going twice. Any last questions for Mike? No, we're good. All right. Well, Mike, this is so great. Thank you so much for sharing. And I hope everybody on the call buys the 5th quarter and shares it with your friends. Tell all the 9-10-year-old kids that you know to go out and read it. And I guess we'll be seeing you on hearing your Process Party podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was great. I really enjoyed
All right.
it.
If everybody could unmute and just say thank you, I would really appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great book. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye.